All right, so today we're going to talk all about how to deduct your vacation. And this is one of the most common questions I get around how do I navigate deducting this? This feels weird. I feel like I shouldn't be deducting this, or should I be deducting this? And it's one of the more gray areas for my entrepreneur clients who maybe are a little bit more afraid to deduct a trip as a business trip that they don't feel like is fully business. And I'm here to tell you that you have the capability to deduct a lot more than you think you do. And you're going to learn all about that in today's episode. So if you're traveling, starting to meet people in person, going on retreats, joining masterminds that meet in person, and going to events, trainings, things like that, then you really want to pay attention to this episode and remember what you can take advantage of here, because you can actually save a lot of money by implementing a lot of the tips that are in here. So, like I said, very often entrepreneurs hesitate to deduct travel because they're either not aware of what they can deduct, or they think they can't because they think that it's pushing the rules too far. And we'll cover what some of the rules are, but we're going to work within those rules and still save a ton of money. So let's start with the key here is making a business trip deductible through a business intent. Okay, a business intent. What do I mean by that? I mean that you have to have a compelling reason to go to your destination for a business purpose. What I'm referring to is if you pack up your laptop and go to a new destination and start working the same way you would if you were home, and you just put up shop in a coffee shop in a new location, that is not a business trip. That is just working in a different location. And there's a very big difference here. And I have to coach my clients and other entrepreneurs all the time on this concept that your business travel must have a purpose to go to that destination that relates to your business. So I just posted on Instagram recently that bringing your laptop to Tulum is not a business trip. That's what I'm talking about. Like, you can't go to a tropical destination, work from the beach, and call it a business trip. So what is a business trip? What constitutes a business trip? Well, if we're talking about domestic travel, it means that the primary purpose of the trip has to be business related, which means the majority of the days you're spending traveling, including your travel days, so the majority of the days must have a business purpose, or put differently, must contain business activities. And if you're traveling abroad, if you're going to a foreign country, normally 25% of the trip would have to have a business purpose. So I like to use the rule of thumb of shooting for the majority of days, because that means your trip is deductible nonetheless. So let's talk about how we maximize the number of days we can consider business related for our trip. Now, your trip's evaluated by the number of days, and a majority would have to be business. We're not talking about hours spent. We're talking about how many days did you spend conducting business activities during the course of your trip. And everything is measured in days. So if you have a 7-day trip, that means 4 days have to contain business to be over 50%. You also need to leave your tax home for a period of time that would require you to stay overnight. Now, your tax home is where your business is based. So if you're working from home, starting your business from home, working online, then that is your tax home. If you have a storefront, a brick and mortar, that would be your tax home. But in general, your tax home is where you're based, and a business trip would have to be compelling enough to pull you away from that tax home for an overnight trip. It can't be close enough. It can't be down the street, for example. You could go home at that point. And a business purpose, so the business activities we're talking about to spend those days, let's think about this. What could you do in your destination that would help serve your business, help fuel your business, and help it grow? Here are a few examples. You could attend a conference, training, or seminar. You could meet with clients, prospective clients, or even past clients if you wanted to. You could scope out real estate for future office space. I mean, there are tons of options. You can interview candidates for new positions. You can explore new areas for potential storefront. I mean, there are so many different options. You can even go to trade shows to examine whether you want to purchase a booth next year. You know, you could really use a lot of different options to create opportunities for business growth in your destination. Now, here's the thing though, documentation is everything. Documentation is everything. So if you're going to be engaging in these business activities in your destination, make sure you're keeping really good documentation of your itinerary, what you're doing, your schedule, brochures, any artifacts that you can take with you from these places, obviously your receipts for anything you're spending. So just keep that in mind. Documentation is absolutely everything when it comes to deducting business travel. Now, we talk a lot about, well, we can deduct business travel, but what does that mean, Shan? What can I actually deduct? So if your trip qualifies as mostly business, if we're already there, we have a business trip on our hands, you can deduct the airfare to and from your destination or transportation. You can deduct baggage fees, a hotel stay, 50% of your meals typically. You could deduct your laundry and dry cleaning costs, a car rental, and other costs that you're incurring on your trip that are ordinary and necessary during the course of the trip. Now, if only a portion of your trip is considered business, meaning a minority, you can still deduct expenses associated with the business days, just not for all of the trip. So what you would have to do is apply a percentage of how long you stayed or how long your trip was with how many days did you spend conducting business. So for example, if it's 2 out of 5, that's 40%. So generally 40% of your costs are going to be deductible, just not 100%. So you can still take advantage of deductions, even if you don't have a complete business trip. So that's why I always encourage my entrepreneur clients, please, if you're going to travel, make sure you can find a reason to do business at least one day while you're there. And again, it could be as simple as meeting up with a client, a potential client, a colleague, a mentor, and finding a chance to get together, because that's all that really matters, is that you're building your business, discussing business, and like I said, documenting it. That's very, very important. So now let's talk about, well, what makes a business expense a business expense? Like, what do you mean, Shannon, by it has to be a business expense? It has to be ordinary and necessary for your business. And there has to be a limit on extravagance, we'll say. And while you might be tempted to rent out a Porsche or, a G-Wagon, if a Honda can get the job done by renting a car, then you're pretty much expected to spend within reason. You don't have to go with the cheapest car by any stretch. It just has to be reasonable. So you don't have to get the most expensive rental car just because. And keep in mind, you are still paying these expenses. When we say they're deductible, we don't mean you're going to get a rebate. We mean that you're going to be saving money in taxes for the money that you're spending. But at the end of the day, you're still spending the money. So spend it wisely and don't go above and beyond what you would normally do or expect as a business owner, and you'll be fine. So here's another great strategy that I think is really cool. If you need to conduct business on both a Friday and a Monday, the entire long weekend trip would be considered deductible, because it's customarily cheaper to spend the weekend than to fly back and forth. So if you have a business intention, a business purpose on a Friday of the week, and then the following Monday as well, then the IRS, just like your company would, right? If you're working at a company, your company would expect you, if you have to work Friday and Monday, that you would have the option to spend the weekend, because it's cheaper to pay for a couple nights of hotel than it is for the airfare back and forth. So the IRS agrees and says you can do what's called wrap a weekend. And the IRS allows for this and lets you take reasonable expenses incurred over the weekend as a deduction. So if you are planning a trip, it is very convenient if you choose to wrap a weekend. And that means that your hotel stay over the weekend, your meals over the weekend are all still deductible, just like it's a business trip. So again, within reason, obviously. And when it comes to any of these expenses, guys, check with your accountant, sit down and have a planning meeting before you go on your trip. Come up with an itinerary, talk about what you're going to be doing, talk about what the opportunities are for deductions, and do a little bit of research on what types of business activities you could engage in. Are there any workshops happening? Are there any clients in the area. So really try to examine how you could take advantage of this and plan ahead. So if you're trying to identify some possible reasons to travel for business, right? If you know you want to take a trip, you know that you have business to take care of while you're there, ask yourself this, okay? Here are some examples of ways to get creative. Let's say you also host a podcast. Are there any guests that you can interview while you're live out in your destination? Are there any shows that you can be on live with the host while you're there? Do you have any client contacts that live in the area, or contractors and employees who do, that can come up and meet you? Would it make sense to invite business contacts to a gathering there? Would it make sense to have your own team meeting in that location and invite your team? Are there any spots that you can scope out for potential retreats or events in the future? Is there a trade show in town where you can attend or buy a booth? And are there any live trainings happening? So ask yourself a few of these questions as you're planning your next trip. And I guarantee you can find something. You can find something to be able to engage in for business. Let's use an example. Let's say you fly out to Sedona on Thursday, grab dinner with a mentor or colleague on Thursday night. On Friday, you go check out a potential Airbnb for your next retreat. Saturday, you go hit up a wine tasting. Sunday, you head to brunch, you go for a hike. And Monday, you meet with some clients that you have out there, and then you fly out in the afternoon. This is a business trip. This is entirely a business trip. Why? Because Thursday, you conducted business by going to dinner at night. Friday, you went to check out a potential Airbnb for your retreat. That's a business activity. Monday, you met with your clients. That's a business activity. And you get to wrap the weekend. So it's considered a business trip. Most of the expenses you incur while you're there would be considered tax deductible. Most of them, not quite all of them, but enough to make it worthwhile for sure. Now, as I mentioned before, one of my biggest pro tips is prepare in advance. Double down on your planning and discuss it with your accountant, because you really need to make sure that you are aligned before you go out on your trip. You know how to maximize those deductions, and you know exactly what to look for and what to keep as documentation. Now, make sure, I keep saying this, you have to retain some sort of evidence or artifact like meals receipts, and itinerary, real estate listings, or a brochure from a trade show. This is so important. This is a key area where the IRS can scrutinize, because people take advantage of the business travel deduction and they exploit it. So it's really always best to keep clear documentation in case this time ever comes where you would get audited and you'd have to prove the business intent of the trip. And it's honestly easy to prove if you have that documentation ready to go. Now, you might be wondering if you can take advantage of this for your business entity structure. In most cases, yes, business travel will be deductible for any type of business and accounted for where you keep track of your expenses. So if you're an LLC, sole proprietor, S Corp, C Corp, if you have a business trip where the nature of it is business and you have business intention, then regardless, you should be able to deduct this on your P&L. Now, this is also a great reason to expand your circles and network. Now, during the pandemic, many of us got on Zoom, made new connections. For example, I joined masterminds with people from all over. All over the world, all over the country. And I can safely say that due to these masterminds and communities and networks, I now have a reason to conduct business in most US states, and my clients do as well. They have a reason to deduct a trip to visit me, especially that I live part-time in Costa Rica. So if my clients decide to visit in Costa Rica, they now have a deductible reason to come and visit me. So if that is convincing enough to encourage you to pursue being my client, then let us know. So that's really part of the fun of it, is you can find a business reason to do a lot of different activities, travel being one of the most fun. And I really enjoy working with clients to maximize this deduction, because I think it's so lucrative. I think it's so creative, and it enables you to create lasting experiences, lasting memories, while also doing business. They don't have to be mutually exclusive, right? You can deduct a portion of your trips that you also consider vacations, and you can integrate that life and work a little bit and get a benefit from it too. So I hope you're able to utilize a lot of the tips that we went through in this episode. Please, this episode especially, share your takeaways. What did you learn today? What are you going to do on your next business trip? And how can you take advantage of this deduction? I want you to post on social media, share it to your Instagram stories, and tag me at Shannon K. Weinstein. I'd love to hear what you're learning from this podcast and how it's helping you as an entrepreneur. All right, I'll see you next time.